Well, welcome. We're glad to have you join us for a unique event, a virtual winery tour and the entrepreneurial journey of Bart O'Brien. So glad to have you with us for this very special event. It's my joy to be able to introduce Bart O'Brien. Bart is the owner of O'Brien Estate Winery. He is also a member of the board of directors of BioIncept. We'll talk about that later in our presentation tonight. But I know him mostly from being an active alum in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's hosted an annual summer welcome reception since 2004 at their beautiful winery for students and interns, as well as our alumni. Over 1,000 alumni and students have had an incredible experience being out in his beautiful winery, and you'll get to see it now. He's also served on our alumni board from 2011 to 2017 and currently serves as one of our alumni board ambassadors. Now we're going to share a brief video, a video tour of O'Brien Estates, and afterwards we'll hear from Bart himself on his entrepreneurial journey. So join me as we watch this tour.
Welcome to O'Brien Estate. This is my wife Barb. I'm Bart O'Brien. We bought this piece of joy 20 years ago. This dream started on our third date 34 years ago. We met in San Francisco. Barb invited me to come to Napa Valley with her, and I was madly in love with her. And she said during that date, "I dream of owning land in Napa Valley one day." I'm gonna put that on my to-do list. If I can get her to marry me, anything's possible. Why not? Land in Napa Valley. So surprisingly, just 15 years after we were married, we were able to fall extraordinary luck, find this piece of property. We're surrounded by our own vineyards. We have 40 acres here. We live on the property. We have a winery. We've raised 2 children here. And you talk about having your dreams come true, this is it. We'd love to share this dream with you. We make about 5,000 cases of wine here, all from our own grapes. We only sell it to people who visit here. It's all direct, really direct to consumer. We don't even sell on our website to people who are not members. Because the member experience is what we really enjoy. We want to meet people, want to meet everyone, and that, in my opinion, is what makes us so special, the members that we have. We love to socialize with them. So we invite you to come see us. We know you may not be able to come sooner, but you can come later. But we want to share the magic of this place with you and the magic of Napa Valley, and particularly this particular gem. So thank you. We look forward to meeting you in person.
Well, Bart, I'm always inspired to see your beautiful winery where we've had so many amazing experiences and receptions over the years. So thank you for opening up the vineyard for us tonight, giving us a little visual tour of it. And I want to congratulate you first on your 20th anniversary of O'Brien Estates. That's quite an accomplishment. We'll talk about your journey tonight, but this has been a unique year, I think, for you. Unique for all of us with COVID-19, the coronavirus, but also in Napa, as we've heard in the news, the wildfires there. So maybe as we begin, you could share with us how you're coping with the fires. Certainly our thoughts and prayers have been with you, your family, and the other people affected by the fires out there. But what's happening to O'Brien Estate, and what do you see happening in the industry in the Valley?
Well, first, John, I want to say it's a pleasure to see you again virtually. It is a shame that we didn't have our annual party this year. The 16th would have been great. They're absolutely fabulous, and it's so much fun to meet people. But as you mentioned, yeah, COVID has changed a lot of things. And recently, now the skies are blue again today, but for the last month, we had about 30 days of smoke. And our hearts go out to the number of wineries. There were 17 wineries that were badly damaged. Some burned to the ground in this recent firestorm. I think another 190 buildings or businesses were taken out. This is just Napa, I think Napa and Sonoma together. But the good news is the fires are under control now. The air is clear again. And the cities of Calistoga and St. Helena, we had entire communities that were evacuated. It was literally amazing. Entire towns were evacuated. And fortunately, the firefighters mounted heroic stands and kept the fires at bay, which, given we've been in a drought for 2 years, is really tough. I mean, there's a lot of dry stuff around here to burn. And we were very grateful to them. Hearts go out to the people that lost their homes. And it's really, one of the tragic things is we had 2 of the major luxury hotels burned down. The other was Calistoga Ranch. And each of those, I would guess, probably employed 250 people. So there's 250 jobs gone. And you just really have to, just get a sense of some of the devastation that some people have gone through. So it's not going to make life in Napa Valley any easier. I imagine tourism is going to be down next year. But on the other hand, life goes on. This is the essence of life, is seeing how you react to the challenges and things before you. And, quite frankly, that's the only way you can figure out who you are, is by your reaction to challenges. So if without any challenges, you don't really have much to judge yourself by. So you can always take, we do a Friday afternoon little Facebook Live video we call Our Glass is Half Full. And part of that message is, no matter what's going on, all you have is these precious moments of your life, and you should try to figure out to enjoy them the best you can. And even if the best you can is seeing how you happen to respond to a disaster, well, enjoy your response and respond as best you can in such a way to impress yourself. And, be a hero. Be a hero to your friends. Be a hero to your family. Do whatever you can. Long answer to a short question, but here we go.
Thanks, Bart. Well, we appreciate that and your perspective on it. Let's talk about your journey. Perhaps we'll start at your days after attending GSIA, now the Tepper School. How did your career begin after school?
Well, it's interesting. I applied for jobs at these different companies, and I was working for Texas Instruments, I think, as a summer intern. On the way back, I met a woman in a bar and just had a conversation with her. And her dad ended up hiring me to work for a little Florida company called Paradigm. And this was, at the time, a $50 million company on its way to $250 million. I was working at the headquarters, and they're in the modem business, back when the modem business was relatively new. Quite frankly, they're making money hand over fist. And that was their first MBA they hired. They didn't quite know what to do with me. So they put me on the MIS committee, among other things. And I went to a meeting, and we were running the entire company off of System 34 and System 36 IBM mini computers, which the 2 computers didn't talk to each other. And the company's growing, doubling in size year over year. And so I went to this MIS meeting. I wanted to get reports of the marketing department I worked for, the sales department, want to know who their customers were. Literally, they want to know who their customers were in their sales territory, and they want to know what equipment they had. And the company couldn't tell them that. It's just kind of wild. And so I went to this MIS meeting, and I said, this is what we want to know. And they said, well, it'll take us about 2 years to get to that. I thought to myself, wow, I wasn't planning to be in this particular job for 2 years. And if I don't get this done, I don't think I'll be in the company anymore. So I need to figure something out. And just through an extraordinary stroke of luck, I was wandering around the campus, and I came stumbling across a big IBM mainframe computer sitting there in the engineering department. And I said to somebody, what do you guys use this thing for? And they said, well, we use it for, at the time, channel extension. At the time, we have to think this is the old days where you had computers, everything was all together in the same room. And they were trying to, we think about the USB as not a computer. They're trying to extend that on a mainframe across the country. And I said, well, when you guys aren't using it for that, what do you use it with? And they said, it just sits here. And I said, can we get like information, like in a tape off the small computer and put it in the big computer? He said, yeah, we could do that. I said, great. I said, once it's on the big computer, what do you do with it? And they said, well, the guy said, it's funny you asked this. I just bought this report writing software. It's a company called Pansophic. It's called EasyTree. And I spent $25,000 for it. I haven't been able to get anyone to use it. I said, great. So can you teach me how to use it? And he said, no, here's the manual. Read it. You figure it out. Fair enough. So it took me about 3 weeks. And I came back to my boss's office after telling him it was a 2-year delay and handed him a report. And I said, "Is this what you're looking for?" I said, "Where'd you get this from?" And I said, "Well, that's a longer story, but is this what you look for?" He said, "Well, yes, except you have the rows where the column should be and so on and so forth. Even though I had an MBA from Carnegie Mellon, I guess I wasn't smart enough to know that January through December should go on the top and other stuff would go on the bottom, at least at that time." And so anyway, so I come back 20 minutes later and I had the report you're looking for. And they thought, "Wow, that was good." And so that got me off to a good start. And then I decided I wanted to go into sales because I got involved in a commission project. I was doing commission analysis. And I found out that the top salesperson in the company, and this was 1982, the top salesperson in the company was making $500,000 per year as a woman. And the second top salesperson was probably making $350,000. And I was like, whoa, these people, at the time I was making like $38,000 a year. It's like, I want to do that. So I decided I was going to try to figure out how to go into sales, because my dream, ever since I was young, was starting companies. When I read books as a youngster, I didn't read about baseball players or football players. I read about Edison and Tesla and Westinghouse and Ford and Carnegie and people like that. I thought, we're all human beings. If they could start companies, I could start companies too, because that sounded like a lot of fun. And it sounded like, well, why not me? And so I always had this dream as being a young man of starting companies. And watching stuff happening at Paradigm, I kind of realized that sales, quite frankly, is a driver of almost all business. Sell it. Out of business. I mean, that's fundamentally, if you cannot sell it, then nothing else happens. If you can sell it, but not sell it well, then you just have problems. If you used to sell a lot of stuff, you don't sell the stuff anymore, then you got a lot of problems. So it turns out that sales is the engine that drives a company. And that if you want to start a company, you really have to understand how to drive it forward, because starting a company and not having the ability to sell anything means that you're ultimately going to fail sooner or later. So I want to move into sales for two reasons. One, I can make more money that way in the simple-minded view of the world. But more importantly, strategically, this is a very important skill I need to learn if I was going to start a company, because I had to sell investors and the idea of giving me money for their stock. I had to find customers, I had to talk to them, I had to do all this kind of stuff. So I decided, okay, despite my reservations from a image point of view, because my classmates were becoming consultants at Booz Allen Hamilton, they're becoming directors of finance at Ford Motor Company. They're having, nice high-level jobs. I was going to become a sales guy, right, for a high-tech company. And so, so I go back to, after I did this, I go back to my reunions and, people, what do you do? Well, I'm a sales guy. It's like, well, what happened? what happened? You just kind of ended up there, And so that was, it was interesting, but it was the best thing that I could have done to actually achieve the kind of things I wanted to achieve. Because I tell people that if you want to start a company, if you think about it, there's only two jobs in a startup company. You either make the stuff or you sell the stuff. And it turns out, if you can't sell it, it's not worth making. You're just going to have a bunch of stuff sitting around. And it turns out, surprisingly, it's relatively easy to make stuff. You have contract manufacturers, you have people in China, you have everyone, you can make wine, right? But selling wine is much, much harder than making wine. And selling anything is much harder than making it. So if you want to start a company, you want to understand how to sell things to people, or you want to be the technical guy and you want to get someone who sells something to people, but realize that's a very critical function. And in most industries, in software in particular, you can't make it correctly until you try to sell it. You cannot guess what people want. You have to do two things. You can ask them, like a marketing person asks them, what would you like? People tell you they want a Ferrari. And the sales guy comes in and says, that'll be $350,000. The guy goes, I'm not going to pay that. I thought you wanted a Ferrari. Yes, I want one. I'm not going to buy one. That's why I don't have one sitting outside. That's why I have the Toyota Corolla sitting outside. So you have to, the sales becomes kind of like truth serum for what people are willing to actually buy and pay for versus what they just want. So again, I tend to stress the importance of this because when I went to graduate school at Carnegie Mellon, which is fabulous, sales was a bit overlooked. The revenue was kind of assumed, and part of the problem was, well, how do you spend the revenue? Well, that's quite frankly fairly easy. And then we do what's called making the numbers dance, so it supports whatever you want to spend it on. But the sales stuff is fun and exciting and absolutely strategic to entrepreneurship.
And that got you into the software industry and some big wins.
Yeah, well, what happened is I tell you more stories. So I got the company, I got into sales, and I got the company to move me out to a sales office, and they gave me a choice of Boston or San Francisco, and I chose San Francisco because it was fun. And actually, speaking of fun, I'm gonna have a glass of wine. I brought a whole bottle out here, and one of my sales guys said, "You gonna drink a bottle during this thing?" I said, "Maybe. That's the fun of owning a winery." Anyway, so I moved out to San Francisco, and I was just burning to start a company because I'd taken a class with Jack Thorne. It was absolutely fantastic. The reason I went to Carnegie Mellon because I had a course in entrepreneurship taught by Jack Thorne, and we read a book that says if you don't start your first company by the time you're 30, you probably never will. And the reason for that is reality hardens around you. Particularly if you don't even have a taste of it, you aren't going to do it. So I was really burning to start a company. I was about 28. So I was out on a date. I drive my 1973 Eldorado convertible, fire engine red. I wanted to have a picturesque lifestyle. And we walked into a bar, and the guy there, we're going to throw darts. And I started talking to him, struck up a conversation. And he told me he's a venture capitalist. And he asked me if he knew any good startups. And he introduced me to this guy that was the first employee of RSA Data Security. And I became the second employee of RSA Data Security. RSA, I was with them for 3 years. I raised all the money for them. I developed the marketing plan. I hired the guy who ended up making the company really successful, Jim Bidzos. And he co-founded VeriSign out of that. And VeriSign is now worth like $24 billion. I think RSA became worth, I don't know, it sold to EMC for $2.6 billion. That's way after I was gone. But I had a great adventure there. Made a little bit of money. I never made the amount of money in my startups I could have because I either sold the stock too early or too late. Usually the exact opposite ends of the spectrum, and usually just, which is fine, actually, absolutely fine. And the reason it's fine is that and surprisingly, if I'd made too much money, it probably would ruin my life because most lottery winners are bankrupt and divorced, and that would have been me. I just know myself. So because it's really hard for me, and there's some people probably do it, it's really hard to put your heart and soul into a venture if you don't have some financial pressure on you. It's really hard to put in literally the 100 hours a week sometimes it takes, unless you got some intensity of purpose, not only in what you want to do, but you owe it to your investors and you owe it to yourself. And and if you have a lot of money, then it's just too easy to relax and enjoy life, which I'm gonna get a little philosophy here. That part of life is not enjoyable. It turns out if you play all the time, you stop having fun. The part of life that's really enjoyable is trying to figure out who you are and what you're capable of, and watching yourself overcome challenges successively larger. And if you can do that, because at the end of your life, you want to look back at your life and said, how did I use this time that I was given? What did I do? Not only for the world, but for myself. What did I find out about myself? What did I learn? How did I personally grow? And just having a ton of money and, it just is not, at least for me, was not a course to that. Under having continual financial stress and pressure was actually good for me and made the whole experience that much more fun because it was incredibly real. You know, it
Well,
was just like failure was not not really an option.
well, that leads into your acquiring the vineyard. So after your startups, and we saw in the video you talked about
Well,
your.
well, here I want to continue the startup story a little bit. I am gonna run out of time eventually, but if I still have some time, I'll tell some more fun stories. So after I left Calico, I went and worked at a normal job, doing normal stuff. And I worked, and then I have like a fever that overcomes me. I need to start another company. It's just madness. And I gotten so mad that I ended up starting a temporary Halloween theme park, believe it or not, with my wife, called the Scaregrounds. We opened up, ran it for a month. We spent $400,000 on it from investors. We had 78,000 people come, got an entertainment tonight. Probably total expenses was probably about $1 million. We lost our shirts. So that was an absolute failure. And then I went back to my venture capital friends and asked them if any startups around. They introduced me a guy, Bill Passman. We started Calico Commerce. We took it public 6 years later for $1.8 billion closing price. So the interesting thing was, if I hadn't done that silly Scaregrounds thing, I may not have gotten to Calico.
Mm.
And having Scaregrounds fail was very painful at the time. But it turns out the worst thing that could have happened is would have succeeded, because I would have just had been stuck doing that. So anyway, so it's also interesting how your life can turn out from what you think was a failure that leads you to a success. And, so you have to enjoy, that part of the adventure too. And so I'm sorry. So your next question was the winery. So how do we do this? Okay. Well, so as I said in the video, my wife and I met 34 years ago, and we always had in the back the idea that we would start a winery in Napa Valley, and or buy land in Napa Valley. And at the time, I still had all these startup stock from Calico Commerce in the bank, and I was worth a lot of money. I was worth more than a small fortune. I was worth a pretty good fortune. And so we decided we'd go start shopping for land in Napa Valley. We found a place out of the blue, and bought it 3 days after we saw it. My wife didn't want to buy it. And we bought this. We had no idea about the wine industry. We bought it as a second home. We thought it'd be fun to have a place in Napa Valley. And we thought, we'd sell the grapes and maybe let people make wine there. And then suddenly the market crashed in 99, wiped out most of all the equity I had. And I had no money left to pay for the winery. And we suddenly realized that we couldn't actually own it unless we made it into a winery and made it successful. So we scrambled around and talked to some people, and I fortunately hired a very talented winemaker. And we started the business, and we're selling all over the country, 37 states. And things weren't going that well. And there's a smart young guy named Grant Long Jr., who was making his wine here, said to me one day, he says, I don't know why you spend all this time traveling around the country selling wine when there's like 5 million people a year who come to Napa Valley looking for wine they cannot buy at home. I said, well, that's a great focused marketing statement. Oh, all we have to do is stay here and let people come to us. And that's worked out incredibly well. And so we have been doing that now for 20 years and maybe last 12 years under this new business model. And it is now a dream come true. This is really fun. So I'm going to drink to that.
That's a great story, Bart. How long did it take for you to break even, to make it a profitable business for yourself? I've heard the story about losing money on a vineyard in Napa. So that seems to be a common thing that many people have done.
Well, the phrase people like to say here is, if you want to make a small fortune in Napa Valley, you start with a large fortune. In other words, it doesn't go down. It took us 10 years. It took us 10 years of really hard work, a financial crisis in 2008, 2009, getting loans called on us, thinking we were going to get foreclosed on. And, it's like an adventure movie. It's like a great, you look back and you go, wow, and thank God it came out well. But that was part of the excitement of life. And it took us 10 years. We didn't make a dime until 2010. And so it was really hard going out to banks in 2009 after we had this $1 million loan called on us. and saying, well, I promise we'll make money next year. We're like, really? So the only bank that would loan us any money was the one that currently held the mortgage on the property because they didn't want to take it into receivership. So they gave us the money. But since then, since 2010, we've been steadily improving. And now this has become a nice business.
Well, how did you carve a niche for yourself in what's a very highly competitive, established marketplace out in Napa Valley and Sonoma? How did you make your wine stand out?
Well, we did it in two ways. We first, we created a romantic branding concept in that when I realized how tough the wine business was, and that this was not just going to be a walk in the park, but this was another startup that I was going to have to not only work hard at, but I was going to have to think hard about, and kind of put on my little Carnegie Mellon marketing hat and start thinking, okay, what is the fastest growing underserved segment in the market? It's something that I want to cut them off at the pass when anyone else even knows they're there. And it's kind of interesting to look back because this is old history, but 20 years ago, surprisingly, women generally did not drink white wine. Women drinking red wine 20 years ago was like women smoking cigars today. There's no rules against it, you just don't see it very often. And there's this thing called the French paradox that came out. So red wine sort of being seen as a health benefit. And women's lips started moving along, social mores started changing. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on the court and moving things along for women is great. And I started noticing more and more women drinking red wine. I said, oh, this is interesting. So this is going to be a trend that I could see starting. So I wanted to create a red wine that appealed to women without turning men off. I didn't want to do a girly wine, pink bottle, that kind of stuff, because that turns women off too. Women do not like women's versions of men's products because always assume they're less. Women don't mind buying a product that might be considered a men's product, like wine at the time, or red wine, but that has a certain something that would appeal to them. Again, so we're trying to, if you would, thread a needle. So my insight to this is I wanted to use perfume as a packaging model, because perfume is all about the packaging, all about some sexy series of words written on it. Don't list the ingredients. It's what you call hope in a bottle. And it's also a lot of money. And so I came up with this idea that wine has been described as being seductive. We actually had that word on our back label for our Merlot. But most wines have these 50 words on the back label. It says aged in small French oak barrels and pairs well with red meat, kind of stuff. And I thought, I'm going to make a very sexy minimalist label. We had this big gold O, and I was going to give it a sexy name, and I chose the name Seduction. And I was going to write a little poem on the back, and I was going to market it as a wine for women. And it turned out, fortunately for us, there's this big movement that was starting was wine for women. And again, it's part of Women's Lib, and a woman named Leslie Sciabracco wrote a book called Wine for Women. And so newspapers were doing these reports on wine for women. We got caught up in that. I even got on Neil Cavuto for 4.5 minutes on live national television in 2008. But that was the start of this marketing, the idea of having a distinctive marketing angle rather than just having O'Brien Estate Merlot. So we'd have O'Brien Estate Seduction. And this worked really well in restaurant wine lists for dates, you can imagine. I'm going down the list of things. Cabernet Seduction. I'll have one of those. And it just gave you a reason for someone to talk about your wine. It was also a great mnemonic. Most people on Monday morning cannot remember the great joke they heard Saturday night or the great bottle of wine they had, because there's no handle there. It's either named after someone's name, O'Brien, which there's 50,000 of those. It's named after some geographical chalk hill or this, that, or the other, running rabbit. But when you give it a word like seduction, there's only a limited number of words used to describe romance. And so if people can't remember the word seduction, they call it obsession because of the big O in the bottle. And then we put it in a red gift bag see-through red gift bag. We call it a negligee. And so people had 3 different ways to remember the wine. They could remember the name Seduction, they remember Big Gold O, and they could remember the red bag. So they go in a wine shop and say, you have any wine in the red bag? And people know what they're talking about. So that worked very well for us. And then we decided to extend that. My wife created a wine called Flirtation. Yeah, we put Flirtation and Seduction next to each other. And that made me uncomfortable because I wanted to move them apart. I didn't want to have this concept of almost a one-night stand. I wanted to have a romantic journey. And that gave us the idea of using these 2 bottles as points on a longer relationship story, and using our different bottles of wine that we would create of telling the story of a lifetime journey of romance, which then works very well because people remember stories. The human mind is oriented around storytelling because that's before written language was developed. That's Homer and all that. We're all verbal. And so that was another. So the biggest thing is, how do you get people in a very crowded market? We got 10,000 wineries in the United States, almost, probably 2,000 in California. How do you get people to remember your name? And to look, how do they get them to identify with you at first, what they're looking for, and the second, how do you get them to remember you after you found it? So, and then I wrote poetry for the back of the labels, and we're under an enormous financial stress, so I put everything I possibly could into making this not only a work of art, but a great product, but also the outside of the package I want to be as useful and interesting as the inside of the package. Actually, the way I said to Neil Cavuto is I wanted the packaging to touch someone's heart before the wine touched their lips. That was my goal. And so that
Well, Bart,
helped.
how about give us one of your poems, one of your favorites from the bottle of wine.
Well, my favorite is Romance of the Heart. Now, this is the stage. This is like the 3rd poem. We have fascination. You meet somebody, see them across the room. Attraction, you actually talk to them. Romance of the heart. Now you're falling in love with them. And on the back of the label, it says, extend to me the hand of conversation. Twirl me with laughter. Embrace me with kindness. Will you be mine for a moment or for a lifetime? Now, it's so interesting. When you first start doing this, you feel kind of weird, you're reciting your poetry to people in your backyard, but you get used to it after a while.
Well, I have to say, and I don't know if all of our audience knows that O'Brien Estates is consistently rated one of the top wineries to visit in Napa Valley. And I know you're a genius at marketing, but tell me, what makes your winery stand out? In addition, you've got some really highly rated wines. So tell us about.
We have these old-fashioned barrel chairs. It's kind of a funky place. It's kind of interesting. One of the things that we are taking advantage of, we're actually one of the older wineries in Napa Valley. We're winery like number 39, we think, after Prohibition. And most wineries you come here have new stuff. They have new furniture. They often have tasting rooms, which are like executive conference rooms, and so you might be usually looking at the grapes often out the window. They're over there, like 50 yards away. Well, the grapes are right behind us. We sit people out here, 10 feet from the grapes. They can walk over and pick a grape and eat it if they want to. Our chairs are made out of old barrel staves. We deliberately have, as part of what we do here, have old beat up furniture and stuff because it's so different. It makes people feel very relaxed and comfortable. But again, on the mnemonic side, as part of our brand, is that we're different than the other guys, and we stand out a lot more. And people love that. And part of the goal here is become, we've been doing this for 20 years now. Is so and we've had, I don't know, probably 70 literally engagements here. And I want people to come back 20 years from now, if they've been engaged here, and come back, and it's going to look exactly the same. Because that's what I want. My wife and I went to Venice on our honeymoon 32 years ago. And I'm hoping when I go back that Venice hasn't changed. And that's why Venice is such a marvelous place. And, you hope if you can find the restaurant you ate in that it looks exactly the same. And that's what we're trying to do here.
You've taken a very relational model in your marketing, and you've built a wine club out of it. Can you talk a little bit about the wine club and the wines that you have, that you produce?
Okay, we have about 13 wines. They range in price from, I think our least expensive bottle of wine is either a Rosé or a Sauvignon Blanc, which is about $38 a bottle, maybe 40 now. Our Chardonnay is 50. Our Cabernet Sauvignon, we go up the price. Cabernet Sauvignon is 98, which by Napa Valley standards is very reasonably priced. Cabernet Sauvignon, we're probably 1/3 less than our competitors. In the normal set, then you have cult wines that cost hundreds of dollars. And then we have reserve wines, which do cost hundreds of dollars. They go from $125 to about $225. And those wines compete against the finest in Napa Valley. Highest score we've gotten so far is 98 points from Robert Parker Jr. We're fortunate. All of our wines are made from grapes we grow ourselves. Everything comes on the property here. That's part of the unique. There's no other place that's going to taste just quite like this. And we have a lot of consistency year to year because we're controlling our grape source. It also allows us to make better wine because we integrate the vineyard management into the winemaking, because great wine is made out in the vineyard. You can make good wine from great grapes. You cannot make great wine from good grapes. You can only make great wine from great grapes. So you have to manage it out there. So that also is part of our, because there's just not that many wineries left, particularly in Napa Valley, that are truly estate bottled, family owned, and small. So people like the interesting aspect of that.
You also welcome people into your home, and
we do. Well, you asked about the membership model we have is very interesting, because I, as a business guy, I'm always looking for value. I'm not a real big high-end brand guy. I love expensive stuff. I love yachts and cars, and I don't want to pay full price for them. I just hate that. And so I buy used stuff. If I buy I've been a partner, and I've owned one yacht and been a partner in another, and the one I owned myself I bought used for half price, and the one that I was my partner in, we bought a demonstrator. Because the other guys are far more wealthy than I am, but they're just like me. They're kind of cheap. So I wear a Citizen watch, because it's solar powered. I like that. I own a beautiful Cartier dress watch, which I bought used, so it's half price. So that's who I am. So I appeal to people. My wine appeals to people like that, who like really fine wine, but don't want to pay $250 or more a bottle for it. And so the membership model, we have about 3,000 members, and that's all we sell our wine to, allows us to reduce our cost of sales and marketing, our overall expenses. And so sales and marketing is usually about 30% of a company's expense line. And we can reduce ours down to about 6%, because we only pay our salespeople commission the first time someone signs up for the wine club. On the first order, the usual lifetime value is about $2,500, $3,000 or so. So we have this we have the sales expense up front, we have this long tail of people continuing to buy the product. And it's been absolutely amazing. And so that helps us reduce our costs, helps to give stability to our business, which saved us during COVID, quite frankly. And we're actually going to take that further. My goal now in 5 years is to set this up as a private club in Napa Valley. So unless you are a member here or a guest of a member, you actually can't just come visit the property.
Of course, you always have a special place for alumni from the Tepper School and Carnegie Mellon.
Of course. All I have to do is mention Tepper, and we'll let you in. But
you also do international tours with them too. You've created a family of your friends who've been part of your wine club.
So we invite our members to go on cruises with us, which, quite frankly, is about as much fun as I can have as a human being. In that we get about 100 people, and we're in last September, or a year ago in September, we're in Bordeaux, 100 people on a river cruise. And we spend 8 or 9 days together, then like 3 days pre-tour in Paris. And it is so interesting how well you can get to know people. You're in a beautiful spot, you're drinking wine, you're going to these, and everyone has something to offer. And it turns out we end up seeing lifetime friendships form among people we know we introduced to each other. because they come back to the next cruise in a group of 6 or 8. And I asked them, have you guys been hanging out with each other? And they said, yeah, we've been to each other's homes, stayed each other's, and this is people from across the country. So I think it's pretty interesting when you're in your 50s or 60s and you meet somebody and you become such good friends, you're actually inviting them to come visit you in your home. I mean, it's just pretty extraordinary. So it's kind of an emotional explosion of friendship that we have during these events.
Well, amazing. It's really an amazing model and a unique story. Bart, if you had it to do over again, what would you do differently? I know you'd do it again because I know you love what you're doing, but what would you do differently if you could talk to your younger self?
Well, I think we would start off with the, direct-to-consumer exclusive market model from the start. That would have been, but then again, it's you have to figure out how you promote yourself and so on and so forth. And so the way that we did it, so I went nationwide first, and then I concentrated just on Houston the last couple of years because I figured out Houston could buy all the wine we sold, and it was just easier to sell wine there because they're a distributor and so on and so forth. And then that led to a lot of people, once they couldn't find our wine in Houston, coming to Napa Valley. They were coming to Napa Valley anyway, but they'd specifically look for us because that's the only way they could get it. So looking back, there's not a lot that it would be nice if I start off differently on focus on just the exclusive member only from the very beginning, then I'd have another problem to solve then of how to promote that, and which is easier now with Facebook and all that. But at that time, 20 years ago, it was difficult. So I don't know. It's interesting. So I feel very fortunate because the thing has actually worked out, and I just feel very fortunate. I could have been born 300 years ago, and life wouldn't be as much fun as it is now.
Well, I know we have some aspiring entrepreneurs among our students and alumni. Any advice for entrepreneurs from your life story and experience?
It's a little bit like playing golf. I don't play golf because if you're an entrepreneur, you don't have time to play golf. In fact, you don't have time to do what many people consider to be normal life. If entrepreneurship has gotten very popular. I don't know if it's how easy it is now, how hard it is. It's more acceptable now. When I first started doing it, if you're an entrepreneur, it was weird. People didn't want to hire you for a regular job after that because you've identified yourself as being really strange. Now it's considered to be a badge of honor. Oh, that's great. I had to train myself. So I had to think about it this way. The only way I was going to become a successful entrepreneur is overcoming more obstacles than most people could or anyone I was competing against. I just knew that I was signing up for a low probability of success business, particularly what I was doing. I was doing cold start startups. I was a co-founder of 2 companies. Same with the winery, I guess. BioIncept, yeah. So I'm co-founder, if you would, of 4 companies. And that this was going to be hard. There were going to be times that I was going to be challenged to my max. It was going to involve potential failure. And so I had to train my mind to welcome obstacles. I had to learn how to look at obstacles the way a football player looks at lifting weights. It's not the game of football, but it prepares you for the game of football. Mm-hmm. And so I had to deliberately move myself from a, oh, woe is me kind of mindset. Not that I really had that much, but still I couldn't have that at all. To a, oh, isn't this exciting and interesting? Let me watch myself solve this obstacle and impress myself. So you have to learn how to tell yourself stories that explain to you reality and motivates you to do the things you really need to do to be successful. And part of it is to be willing to make the last few phone calls, to be willing. I mean, even now, okay, I'm 64 years old, I'll be 65 in January. I've been up to midnight every night this week doing work for BioIncept. I'm busy, okay? I watch 1 hour TV a day with my wife during dinner. We're eating dinner, and that's about it. I work pretty much up to dinner. I have dinner with my wife, and then when we spend another hour in conversation with her, and go back to work at midnight. And the reason I do this is because this is the most fun I can have. I mean, it's why watch shows and TV about someone else doing whatever that's made up fantasy versus watching what and so I think that as an entrepreneur, you have to have this kind of an obsessive focus on what you want to achieve in your life. You have to look at this thing as this has to have some kind of meaning for your life, and that this is something you want to do before you die, in my opinion. Because otherwise, there's probably easier way to make money. There's probably more certain ways to make money. You can work hard and become a partner in a law firm, which is very good. I mean, and so not everyone should become an entrepreneur, my opinion, because there's just some easier, better ways to make money, smarter ways to make money. Getting promoted through management ranks at high technology companies is fantastic. My son, for example, is going to do that. I don't think he'll ever do what I did, which is fine, because what I'm trying to say is there's nothing noble about being an entrepreneur. It's not anything like so wonderful. It's a chosen career. It's a chosen profession. Mm-hmm. And my advice is the reason you should choose this profession, it's a little bit like getting married. The only reason you should get married is you can't stand not being married to this particular person. If you can not stand starting a company, you shouldn't start a company. You should only start a company if you cannot stand the idea of not starting a company. You're actually just driven to it.
Well, Bart, I know in addition to your amazing journey, you've also been a very passionate ambassador for Carnegie Mellon and for the Tepper School. So what does being a member of the Tepper alumni community mean to you, and why have you been so active in giving back to the school?
You know, Tepper changed my life. I came from Tepper more or less as a drunken fraternity boy from the University of Florida. I was looking for a school to learn entrepreneurship. And when I set my foot on the Carnegie Mellon campus, I said, this is it. This is going to be my intellectual home base. This is always going to be the place I'm going to come back to. And I want to be a part of this place. And being a part of this place means helping it succeed. It's going to help me succeed. I'm going to help it succeed. I'm going to be part of the team. Why? Two reasons. One, what else am I going to do? How am I going to spend my energy, my time on earth? Why not? I believe that education is the most important thing in the world. It's a true leveler of people. It's the one thing you can do for disadvantaged people that has no side effects. Everything else has some kind of unintended consequence. Education allows people to lift themselves up in the world. The second, Carnegie Mellon, I love the fact we got the #1 computer science school in the world, and we probably have like the #3 or 2 drama school. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And it's such an intense place. And in the business school, I got to know the professors because of the size. And I just said, I want to be part of what helps move this along. I don't want to be someone who just takes, I want to be part of this community. And because I believe that committing yourself to things that you think are important is part of the fun in life. And one of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got was on the ceiling, and maybe I want to say Schlager Hall. That's probably not the right name. It's one of the old halls, and it's got a stained glass ceiling of Andrew Carnegie up on the ceiling, and it says, "My heart is in the work." And I pledged to myself when I graduated, the day I read that my heart would always be in the work. If I didn't want to do the work, if I couldn't put my heart in the work, I would not do the work. And just a funny side story is I worked for Digital Equipment Corporation for an hour because I was feeling abused and beaten up after RSA, and I was scared. And I wanted to make money and work for a large successful company. I joined them, and after an hour, I decided my heart would not be in the work, and I had to quit. And it was just one of those things. But again, I want to put my heart into things. So I put my heart into Carnegie Mellon. And what have I gotten out of it? Lots. Okay. I now, on the alumni board, I met people on the alumni board I'd normally never meet in my life. You know, Brian Olofsky of, CFO of Amazon.com. If I want to get to Jeff Bezos for some reason, I can reach out to Brian, which I've done once before. It's an incredible place. So, it's again, but I just love the school. Love
Well, thanks. Before we conclude in just a few minutes, I want to open it up for some questions from our audience. I know we have one in already, and I wanted to ask you this question. What are thoughts and ideas you have around for wineries and entrepreneurs to thrive in the changing climate in ways that make business sense? You're in an area where there's adapting to fires, climate change, changing business models and things like that. What thoughts do you have for us in kind of sustainability of industries, particularly yours?
There's two questions there. First was a little bit about entrepreneurs and wineries, because I've had people ask me before, how do I get in Napa Valley and get in the wine business? And I personally have said, I wouldn't do that if I were you. It's not a high growth industry. I mean, some people have gotten this industry, have done quite well, but they're the rarities. It's a little bit like going to Nashville and becoming a successful musician. There are examples of people who do that, but it's not an easy thing to do, and it's not an entrepreneurial thing to do. Most people here in Napa Valley either grew up in the wine business here or did something else they were successful at, made a lot of money at, then came to Napa Valley. So if any of y'all want to, as an entrepreneur, come to Napa Valley, start a winery, make a lot of money, you can do it, but the odds don't favor you. The second is the wine business. It's interesting. So I'm looking and say, okay, we got two issues now. We got COVID and we have fires in Napa Valley, which we're going to reduce tourism. So how are we going to thrive and survive? Well, this is why I've been thinking a little bit about this private club idea, because what does that mean? That means we have relationships with people, and particularly introducing people to each other, and we're offering them higher value. And we want to think about what that looks like. But that means also that we would concentrate on the San Francisco Bay Area for membership. So in going nationwide, as we do now, we really start refocusing on our own backyard, figuring out if people can't travel on airplanes, they can at least drive. And if we're going to do a private club thing, then it makes more sense to have the members be able to come up and enjoy the property locally. So we're starting to think through that, but it comes from two things. One is value creation. What are we going to do that actually makes our wine more valuable to people? And the second is niche marketing. What are we going to do to differentiate ourselves so that we're just not another winery along the road? We're the only or one of the very few private club wineries in Napa Valley. And how do we execute on that? And so that's, so I feel sorry for the guys who just opened up a couple of years ago, haven't built a brand, because it's going to be a world of hurt out there for a lot of people.
Well, Bart, this question about BioInsect, and maybe just to say a minute or two about your involvement with BioInsect.
So I got involved with a startup biotech company 10 years ago that my brother introduced me to. He was a leading researcher, liver researcher. And the idea is going to cure immune disorders. One of my friend's wives has multiple sclerosis and is losing the ability to walk. And so I thought, well, again, noble project. What am I going to spend my time doing? So I volunteered to raise money for the company. I've raised, I think, about $19 million so far, surprisingly. $100,000 at a time from people I met at my winery mostly. Again, an obsessive focus on doing that. Thousands of emails, thousands of hours, thousands of phone calls. And we are getting ready to launch a human trial, and probably in December. I won't name the hospital yet because we haven't signed the agreement. We actually have a trial approved right now at the LA Veterans Administration against COVID-19 in both LA and Indianapolis. This new trial is more interesting to me because it's going to be against what we call COVID long haulers. And it turns out, it's just a lot of news reports just coming out on this, is that roughly 50% of the people who get COVID do not recover within 3 weeks. Some of them, even 3 months later, still have neurological symptoms. They have breathing issues, all kinds of issues. So it looks like, my best guess is maybe 20% of people who get COVID are going to have long-term symptoms that are going to extend beyond a year. And this is an incredible national health crisis that's coming, because we have, right now, I believe 7 million people have COVID. By the time this is over, and there may be actually 20 million. Because what's interesting about these long-term symptoms is these people don't even have to be symptomatic to have their heart inflammation, and they don't have to be old. So you have young college athletes who are asymptomatic who now can no longer participate in college sports because of their heart issues they're having. So it's a far more deadly and dangerous disease than we've been led to believe. And we're hoping to be able to address that crisis. And for this, this has been an incredible journey for me in terms of raising the money, fighting with the founders, fighting with the board of directors, get rid of the founders, just all sorts of interesting stuff. But it's more fun than watching TV. I'm living the story, and it's just great. It's just, life doesn't have to be fun. It has to be interesting.
Bart, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today. If alumni who are watching today want to get in touch with your winery, learn more about it, become a member of your club, order some of your wine or whatever, how do they get a hold of you? I think we can pop up a screen that will give them some information as well.
There you go. Yep, that's the best way. That's obviously our website, our business number, email address for our general email inbox.
And then next summer, they can come hopefully to our Tepper annual alumni wine tasting reception at O'Brien Estate Vineyard in July.
Yeah, and because we'll be outside, there's a chance that will come off. I'm not sure about inside things, even that far out. We'll see. We have a cruise scheduled in May to Portugal. Hopefully that'll come off. But yeah, I tell you, I have a fondness in my heart for anyone from Tepper. If anyone wants a little advice, I'm happy to do that. I'm a little time constrained, but I hope everyone out there wants to become an active member of the Tepper community. Support the school, support each other. It's fun. I mean, it is. You're part of a brilliant institution, and you can only help make it better by being involved and being active and putting your shoulder to the wheel. It's fun.
Well, thanks, Bart, and thanks for always having a glass that's half full.
Thank you, John. It's been a real pleasure. And thanks to everyone. Thanks for watching.